Release the Kraken!
Greetings, fellow game designers. Ron here at Lame Duck Studios, and today we're going to take a look at how to take our hand-drawn sketches and make them nice and pretty in Photoshop. So we're working on our Space Invaders game. I'm going to go ahead and create a new file here. I have a bunch of different presets, but I'm going to start off with a simple 512 by 512. Make sure we're in pixels. If you're in inches, that's going to be way too big. Our resolution will be 72 pixels per inch. We're going to be in RGB color, 8-bit. And our background, let's go ahead and make that transparent. And then I'll hit create. That'll give us a nice space to work on. And now I'm going to go ahead and drag in my sketches. So here's my sketch. Drag this in. We'll go ahead and hit the checkbox here. And it's outside, so I'll go ahead and rotate it. Control T will bring up the menu again, and you can just rotate. I'm going to use the Shift key. That way I can snap my rotations. Awesome. And then I'll hit the checkbox. And here are my amazing sketches. Aren't I a fantastic artist? Now, if your artwork looks as pretty as mine, you're going to want to touch these up in Photoshop. Now, if you're way more precise than I am, you can most certainly use your images as references right out the gate without having to do any touch-up work. I am not a very pretty artist when it comes to doing handwork. I make everything rough, and then I make everything else pretty and something else. Hi, kitten. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to grab my image here, and I'm going to just scale it. So Control T, and then I will just scale until the image is a good size to work on. And I'll just move it. And there is my first reference. Now you can see, because my pencil drawing was very quick, I have an idea of what my sketch is going to be, but it's kind of wonky and whatnot. So go ahead and hit your checkbox here. And we have our image, which is fine, but we also want a layer to kind of draw on. So I'm going to come down and hit the plus sign. And that'll make a new empty layer. Okay. For safety, I'm going to go ahead and take my sketch, and I'm going to hit the little lock icon. That way when I try to do any work on it, it'll let me know that it's locked, and I don't have to make any mistakes with that. Now I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I'm working in black and white. You can see down here I have these blue and purple. You can also see up here on blue and purple. I'm going to go ahead and press the D key, and that's going to reset my palette. And now I can do whatever I want. I can come over to the brush, which is this little pencil tool. If I click and hold, we have brushes and pencils. And I can just sketch. You can see I can't sketch here. I have to go make sure I'm on my layer. I can just sketch over and make my lines nice and pretty. Now this is not the most elegant way of making good lines. I'm going to instead use my various tools down here. So if I click and hold on our Shapes tool, you can see that's right under this little arrow. There's T, some sort of arrow, and then we have our Shapes tool. I have all sorts of shapes in here, and we can use our basic primitive shapes to define whatever our spaceship is. So in this case, mine is mostly a triangle. So I'm going to go ahead and grab myself a triangle. Okay. Once I grab my shape, I'm going to come up to the top here, make sure we are on shape. Sometimes it defaults to path or pixels. Just make sure you're on shape. For my fill color, I think what I'll do is pick a red. I'm going to come over to the stroke icon, and I'm going to pick black for my stroke. And then my stroke size, it's currently set to 3. Let's see how big that is. I think I want a stroke of 5. So just change that number to 5. That's nice. And now I can adjust this triangle however I like. Go ahead and grab my move tool, which is up here. I'll move that into position. And I can drop down my opacity over here on my right, just so I can kind of see through what I'm working on. Now because this is bent, I'm going to have an approximation of my shape. So what I want to really do is take this, go back to my shape. If I click on that, it'll bring up my editing tools for my shape. And I'm just going to make sure that this is the right shape roughly of what I have. So about that tall. Cool. Go ahead and zoom in on that. And then of course I have this window that is also here. So I'll click and hold. I'm going to go ahead and grab my rectangle tool. And for this, I'll make a new layer. Now I can draw on the window. So I'm going to drag to get my window shape. You can see I can make this long or short, but if I hold down the Shift key, it'll make sure that it constrains to a perfect square, which is nice. So I'll go ahead and make the good shape. But you can see that the corners are round. I want my corners to be sharp, so I'm going to go ahead and just drag this little circle here to the end to sharpen the corner. Perfect. Now to get this diamond shape here, all I have to do is take this and then rotate it 90 degrees in one of these directions. So I'll hold down the Shift key. So I'll hover my mouse to where my cursor turns into a little curly arrow. I'll hold down the Shift key so I can snap, and then I will just snap this to about here. Now I said 90 because I can't add, but it's actually 45. There we go. And now I can move this into position. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my reference. And let's make my background triangle here. Let's go ahead and solid that up. So I'll bring the opacity up. There we go. Grab my rectangle, move that into position. Okay, and it looks like the stroke on this outline here is a bit too thin, so I'm going to grab my rectangle tool. And I'll just go ahead and set this back to 5. There we go, so it matches. Let's turn my picture back on and drop down my opacity of my layer. Okay, so in the picture we can kind of see that the edges of this triangle, or the edges of this diamond shape, need to be on the edge of my ship here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'll just bring up my opacity. I'll grab my rectangle, and I'll come down to just under the T, we have an arrow. Click and hold. We have two different options. We have the path select, and we also have the direct select. I'm going to grab direct select. What that'll let me do is take the points that are on this. I'm going to go ahead and drag a selection box across so I can get both points. I'm going to pull those points upward. Now when you go to do that, you will get a dialog that says, hey, this will turn this into a live shape. I'm going to go ahead and hit yes. Now I can move these as freely as I like. And I will line them up with this border line here. And then I can take this bottom one, and I'm just go ahead and line those up as well. Now I'm using the arrow keys to nudge. So I'm going to nudge this up about like that. I think it looks good. I do want to change my color. So with my Shapes tool, I'll go ahead and grab that. I'll come up to Fill, and I'll pick a color from my window. I like this teal color that I have here, but if you don't see that, you can always grab the little color window and pick your color out of here. Okay? I'll go ahead and grab that teal. I like that. Good. And you can see I actually have an extra thick border. That's because this is not directly on the line. So I'll make sure I have my move tool, and I'll just nudge this up with the arrow keys. I think that's good. Okay. If I hide these, we can see we have a couple other details here. We have these strokes for the slope of the wing. To make those, I'm going to use the line tool. So I'm going to come down, grab my shapes again. I'll come down to line. Now lines can be a bit confusing. Go ahead and grab the line tool. And then up here, we want to make sure that we're going to turn off the fill. And we'll leave the stroke on, which is fine. Now your stroke does not influence your line. That's actually controlled by your weight. So over here, I'm going to set my weight to 5. And if I draw my line, now I have my weight similar to the rest of my triangle. You can see this here. That's pretty close to what I have. Yeah. So I want this, if I poke the triangle, I want these to kind of go like this. So I'll take my line. And I could just rotate this, but I find it'll be a lot easier if I just take my direct selection tool and I select my line. Now you'll notice that the line really is just a rectangle. So you can see here, I have my points. I grab both points, and I can move these to where I want. I'm going to say yes to my, turning this into a live shape. Say yes. And I'll move these where I want. That looks pretty good. And then I take this and copy it for the other side. So I'm going to go up, grab my move tool. For my line over here, I'm going to go ahead and hold down the Alt key. And then I'll drag this line shape down and let it go. And now I have a copy. And if I were to click out inside my view, I'm going to make sure that auto select is turned off. But if I click out here with this selected, now I can move this wherever I like. Now I'm just going to flip it. So I'll go up to Edit, come down to Transform, and then I'll do a horizontal flip. Now I have the other side. Let's drag it over. Now, if you don't want this to accidentally move up or down, what you can do is hold down the Shift key as you move it, and that way it won't move up or down. It just moves left or right. And I'll let the Smart Guide snap it into place, and there it goes. That looks pretty even. That looks like at some point my window went back to red. I'm going to go ahead and grab my rectangle for my window, grab my Shapes tool for the rectangle, and I'll do my fill color, and I'll grab my color again, because that got changed at some point. But there is my ship from the front. Awesome. Now I do want to make my other ships, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to my image. I'm going to come down to my canvas size. I'll hit that. And I want to be able to fit all 3 ships on one image. So I'm going to go and change this from inches to %. And I'm going to keep the height the same because I'm going to keep the top and the bottom exactly the same. But I want to make this 3 ships long. So I'm going to change this from 100 to 300. And I want to make sure that this ship stays right here. So I'm going to hit the arrow to the left. And that's going to adjust this so that it expands to the right. So I'll hit OK. Make sure you catch up with that. I'll hit OK. And now I have enough room to make my other ships. And here we go. So here's my other ship from the side. So some things I'm going to want to do. I'm going to want to maintain the height as it is. But you can see this one is a little bit longer than the original. So let's go over to our layers. And I grab layer 1 and hold shift all the way down through the triangle. These are all part of this one. I'm going to come down and see this little folder. I'm going to hit the folder icon. I'm going to make that into a group. I'm going to call this front. Okay. And then from my front, what I want to do is I just want to copy this front triangle. So I'm going to go to Auto Select, turn that on. I'll click on the big triangle. You'll see it grabs it for me. I'm going to hold down the Alt key, left click and drag to make my triangle. And this makes a copy. I'll just move this over. I'll let it go. Awesome. Now you see that it made the triangle. See, it says triangle copy. It's inside of my front group. I'm going to go ahead and drag this above my front group. And I'll close that. Very good. I'm also going to grab the rectangle here from my window. Hold down Alt and then left click and drag. So now I have this one. And I'll just drag that over into position. I'll drop it. And then I'll make sure that I move it out of my front group. And if I make sure it's on the top, it should show up. And I'll close the front. Okay, I'll grab both of these. You can do that by holding Shift or Control when you click. And then I'll add a group. This will be my side view. And now I can work mostly on this side. So let's go ahead and just take my side. I'll drop the opacity down just a little bit so I can see through it. And what I need to do is expand this so that I can reach the end of the tail here. I'm going to turn off Auto Select. I'll grab the triangle inside my side, and then I will get my direct selection tool. So grab that, just drag a box to grab this corner. I'm going to use the arrow keys to expand that out. So go ahead and hit yes, and I'll just expand that. I'll just keep on going until I find a length that I like. I think that's good. And that's probably good for the nose. And now I need this triangle here for the wing. So what's kind of cool is I can actually duplicate the triangle that I have and just drop it in. So I'll go up, get my move tool. I'll take the current triangle that I have. I'll do Alt and then drag it up so it's on top. So here's my new one. Control T to modify the shape. And then I will drag the corner and see if I can get that to match the shape here. And that is pretty close to that shape. I hit the checkbox. And there is my side view. Looks like I need to adjust the window a little bit. So go ahead and zoom in. And you can see for the window, this needs to be adjusted to where this corner is more toward this front area, and then this corner is more down. So I'll grab my window shape, which is my rectangle, get my direct select. I'll grab this point, and I'll just move this roughly down to where I think it should be. Now this point should not be any lower than right about here, because this is the bottom of this window. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab that. I'll use my arrow key to nudge that over. Looks good. And then I'll move this one forward some. I'll grab that and I'll move that. So you can see this shape here behind it, this is technically just a triangle. So check this out. This point I don't even need. So I'm going to go over and grab my pen tool. It's right here. I'll click and hold. And inside my pen tool we have a delete anchor point tool. So I'll go ahead and grab that. And I'll click on the point that I don't need. And it'll snip it off for me. I'll get my direct selection tool again. And I'll just make an adjustment on this corner piece, because it looks like that corner piece needs to be in line with this one right here. So what we can do is make a guide. So up here I have some rulers. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I have my rulers on. So if you don't see the rulers, go up to View and come down and check the rulers. And that'll turn them on or off. Just make sure they're on. So we want to make sure that the window also matches the position of this window. So I'll drag the guide down. So top guide, that's good. I'll drag one more for this corner. And then I'll drag one more for the bottom corner. Okay, so we know that these are where my points need to be. So this one, even though I have the picture drawn like this, it needs to match what's over here. And this is why we make sure that things line up. So I'm going to drag this up to about there. Yeah, and I can move that back. There we go. We get a nice angle on that window. Sometimes our sketches don't match when we actually measure things out, so it's why it's important to go through and do this. And then likewise, we can see the top of this wing here needs to be adjusted. So I'm going to take my move tool. Let's go ahead and clear my guides. So I'll go down to View, go down to Guides, and then Clear Guides. I'm going to drag a new guide for the top of this wing right here. And you can see that this point here needs to be a lot lower. So I'm going to go into my auto select. I'm going to click on this line here, kind of get him. And then I'll get my direct selection tool. And what I'm going to want to do is for both of these, I want to make sure that this is low enough to touch this line. So I'll grab these points and I'll just manually move them down, because that's where that wing is going to connect. See that? And I can use that same method for the other line, so I'll grab that. Now let's make sure that lines up here as well. You can see that even with eyeballing it, if I'm following the guide, I'm pretty close. That should be good. Now I can do my top view. So I'll close down the front. I've got the side, I'll close that down. Close that down. Let's go ahead and do my top view. So for this, I'm going to go ahead and select my selection tool, or my move tool here. I will unlock my background, and then I will drag my background up, and I'll move it in position here. So some things about this top view. I have this diamond shape. That looks like it would be a pretty easy thing to make. And then I have these wings. I could take this triangle and duplicate it, but I think what I'm going to do is make a rectangle and then turn it on its side. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab my rectangle tool, click and drag to make my rectangle. I'm going to hold down Shift to make sure it's square. That looks good. And then I'll go ahead and make the corners nice and sharp. And then I will hold Shift and then rotate it 45 degrees so it's on its side. There we go. Let's line this up and make sure it's going to match the height. So I'm going to go ahead and just line it up with the side view. And what I want to do is make sure that this corner and that corner are the same length, and then this point is here. So let's go ahead and I'll grab a guide to make it easier. I'll put this guide right there. And let's move this guy. So there's that. That's lined up nice and center. I want to get these two top points. I'm going to take this guide, make sure I have my move tool. I'll drag this guide off. That way it's out of the way. If I bring it up to the ruler, it's going to be gone. Okay. Now I can move this point down, but I really don't know where the bottom point's going to be because I need both of these points to move. So what I'm going to do is take my auto select tool. I will click on this triangle. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it. So Alt, click and drag to duplicate. And then I'm going to flip it vertically. So go up to Edit, and then let's do a transform and a vertical flip. And then I will drag this so that it lines up with the other one. Now I can totally use this shape to build this, but instead I'm going to just use it as a guide to make this outer shape here. So I'm going to grab this. I'm going to turn off auto select so I don't mistakenly grab these guys. And now I can make my adjustments to this shape here. So get my direct select tool. I will select this point and I'll just eyeball that shape. So I'll hit yes. That's pretty close. I'll grab this back one and then I'll move that back. Just kind of eyeball it to this point. Again, I'm using the arrow keys for that. Pretty good. And then I'll eyeball this one, lower it down. Looks good. And I'll do this one. And that looks good there. All right. So now I'll grab my move tool. And I need to add on a couple shapes. I need this window. So this window needs to line up with this window. So I'll grab my rectangle tool and make a diamond shape for my window. So here's my square. Again, holding Shift to make it square, and then I'll sharpen the corners. I'll rotate it 45 degrees. Update the color so it's easier to see. And it looks like it dropped down to a 3 on the stroke, so I'll put that back to 5. And then for this window, I'll move this over, and the point of this window needs to be right about here. And then these corner pieces need to come back some. So I'm going to grab a guide and move this back here to where these corners are. All right, I'm going to grab my direct select tool. I'll move the front out to here. I'll go ahead and put a guide there to make it easier to see. Hit yes and move the arrow keys so I can move that out. That looks good. Grab both these points. I'll move them back. So you can see from the top, because this reaches back, we get this arrow shape. Now from the front, it's hard to see because this corner goes back and behind, right? Which is why we need to have our guides to kind of help us see what's going on. I'm going to grab my move tool. I do Control T to bring up the shape so I can modify it. And I want to uniformly make this bigger. That way I can fill in some of this space left and right. So to do that, I'm going to go up to my height. So up and down is my height. So I'm going to grab the height here. Right now it's set to 100%, which is currently however big it is. If I do like 150, I can kind of get that, right? But I don't want to adjust my width. So I'm going to uncheck the box here. There's a little link. And I'll set the width down to 100. Now I have this window a bit more expanded. And that looks like it'll probably be a good size there. And I'll hit the checkbox. And the next thing I need to make is the wing. So the wing starts right about here, right where this guideline is. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my triangle tool. Grab that. I'll drag out a triangle. You can see the triangle for the shape of the wing needs to be kind of flat on the one side and sloped here. So to do that, I'm going to line my triangle up. I'm going to flatten off the one side. So I'll grab a move tool and then Control T. I'll rotate this and line it up with the body. I'll get the first point right there. This point, I can actually just move it by grabbing my my direct selection tool. So grab that. Now I'll grab this point, and I'll just arrow key it. And say yes, I'll arrow key that into position. And then this part here, I'll move that back to straighten it out. Looks pretty good. So now as I'm lining this up, one of the things I'm noticing, I'll go ahead and turn off my window. This wing, if it were to start here, and we look at this example on our side, this side wing can't be here because, check it out, it's forward on the window. But if I were to move this wing forward on the window, it would be like this. So this wing can't be here. This wing has to be moved back. So I'm going to move this one back to about here. And then I'm going to use my auto select tool. I'm going to click on this wing, and you'll see it opens up my side view. And I'm grabbing that triangle. I'm going to use the arrow key just to nudge that wing back so that the tip of the wing at the front lines up right about here. Now this angle here just tells me that this wing actually comes up to a point before it goes back down. So there's going to be a bit of an angle on this wing, which isn't going to be too bad, but I want to be able to pay attention to the start of the wing and the end of the wing. And you can see now the start of the wing matches here, the end of the wing matches about here, give or take some adjusting, and it does have this slope here. Now we won't be able to see this slope from this angle. That's more of something we see from here. We have that slope there. I'm going to use my auto select tool again to grab this wing. Get my direct select tool. I'm going to nudge this group forward some so it lines up with the back of this wing. Again, you can use a guide. If I drag a guide out and just kind of put it right about there, that way I know exactly how far I need to go. I'll just move this in and then I'll nudge it up. Awesome. And I'll get my move tool. Let's go ahead and fill in this wing to be the right color. This should be red. To do that, I used my triangle tool to get access to this. And now I'm going to duplicate my wing. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key and then left click and drag. And I want to flip this wing and put it down here. So I'm going to hit Edit and then do a transform. And that'll come down to vertical flip. There we go. I'm going to hold down the Shift key and then left click and drag. Whoops, make sure I don't grab the extra stuff. That is part of the downside of having auto select on. I'm going to turn auto select back off, just to make sure I have my wing there. If you didn't lose your wing, don't worry. But I did lose mine. Go ahead and flip it. And now if I hold Shift and then left click and drag, I can drag down. I don't have to worry about left and right, and I can just snap this to there. And the guides guided me. So there's my ship. Come down, I'll make sure I turn my window on. That one's good, that one's good. Just go ahead and look at all these, make sure the opacities are good. I'm going to grab these pieces. I don't need to grab my reference down here. I'm going to set these inside of a layer, or inside of a group here. And this is going to be top. So now I have my side. I'll set the side back up to 100%. And then for my side, I don't need this bottom one. I'll leave it on, but I'll just go ahead and hide it. There we go. And that's my triangle 1, copy 3 there. I'll go ahead and close up the side. And then I'll take my top view, make sure auto select is turned off. And I'm just going to hold down Shift and then left click and drag so this is lined up pretty good on here. This one and this one I can move over a little bit, so go ahead and grab my front and my side. I'm using Control to grab both groups. I'm going to hold down Shift, left click and drag, and just move these over. I'm going to get those on there. And get my front view, hold Shift and drag. Alright, I'm going to hide my background layer. I'm going to put in a background color that's easy for me to deal with. So I hit this color shape down here. It's a circle with white and black. It's a little yin-yang symbol. I'll grab that and grab solid color. And I'll put on a background that I like. You can put on whatever color you like. And I'll just pull this down to the very, very bottom. And there's my background color. All right, let's go ahead and clear the guides. View, guides, and then clear guides. Let's go ahead and save our Photoshop file. And then we will also save out a PNG file that we can use for Maya. So go to File, come down to Save. That'll save our Photoshop file. Find some place on your computer or on your cloud that you want to save it to. I'm going to call this Ship Example. And this I'll do Ship Example tut for the tutorial. And then save out your copy. Go to File, Save Copy. And we'll make this a PNG. So hit the drop down, we'll do PNG. And I'll grab my ship 1, and I'll go ahead and just do an underscore tut for tutorial. Make sure you name your ship. And then save it. Okay. There we go. So now I have my images cleaned up and ready to go into Maya. And these are going to be very accurate, so when I start modeling, I don't have to worry about any mismatched vertices or anything like that. It should be pretty close to what the vision is. So hopefully you enjoyed this. Make sure you save your work, and I shall see you next time. Hey guys, thank you for checking out my channel. Misty and I both thank you. If you enjoyed that video you just watched, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. Or if you want to support the channel, check me out on Patreon or pick up one of my books, Life and Times of Dinah Marton or The Guardian's Path of Ascension. Speaking of which, I'm converting The Guardians into a graphic novel / comic book series. Here is a sneak peek. My wonderful artist, Patrick, is doing a great job. I'm excited. I want to push this out as soon as possible. So definitely keep your ears and eyes open for that. I'll be making announcements as we get closer, and I'll post some shots of that as we go. And if you want to follow me on social media, you can check me out on Twitter. I guess now it's X. Who does that? It's BruceRF1 at Twitter, or at whatever the new thing for Twitter is. Anyway, hopefully see you there, and I'll see you guys next time.